The hotel manager looked at the computer screen and shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but your reservation has been canceled due to a system error. You'll need to leave immediately." It was 12:17 a.m., and 84-year-old Sergeant Major William Thompson stood in the lobby with his small suitcase, having just arrived from his wife's funeral. Outside, freezing rain pounded against the windows. The manager didn't care that he'd prepaid months ago, or that he had nowhere else to go. But she didn't notice the group of young men in the lobby bar who'd stopped talking. 24 Army Rangers on leave had just heard every word. Their commanding officer pulled out his phone and sent one text: "Boys, we're about to teach this hotel what 'no one gets left behind' really means." The Grandton Hotel stood as a monument to modern luxury in downtown Columbus, Georgia, just 20 miles from Fort Benning, home of the U.S. Army Rangers. Its marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the lobby always smelled of fresh flowers and expensive coffee. On this particular December night, the hotel was hosting several military reunions, though the night manager, Jessica Palmer, neither knew nor cared about that detail. William Thompson had driven 8 hours from Tennessee, stopping frequently because his vision wasn't what it used to be, especially at night. His wife Eleanor had passed away 5 days ago, after 62 years of marriage. The funeral had drained him emotionally, physically, and financially, but he had to make this trip. His grandson Michael was being promoted to sergeant at Fort Benning tomorrow, following in William's footsteps into the Rangers. William had promised he'd be there, and a Ranger never breaks a promise. The drive had been harder than William anticipated. His 1998 Ford Crown Victoria, maintained meticulously but showing its age like its owner, had struggled through the mountain passes. He'd stopped 6 times, not just for his vision but because his arthritis made gripping the steering wheel agony after an hour. At each rest stop, he'd looked at Eleanor's picture on the dashboard, the one from their wedding day in 1961, her radiant smile giving him strength to continue. When William had booked the hotel room 3 months earlier, he'd specifically chosen the Grandton because it was the closest to the base. The room was expensive, $300 for one night, but he wanted to be well rested for his grandson's ceremony. He'd prepaid with his credit card, printed the confirmation email, and even called a week ago to confirm. Everything was set. But when William walked through the revolving doors at 12:17 a.m., pulling his small, worn suitcase behind him, Jessica Palmer saw something else entirely. She saw an elderly man in a dated suit that had seen better days, shoes that were clean but clearly old, and a slight tremor in his hands that she immediately labeled as problematic. In her 3 years as night manager, Jessica had developed what she called a sixth sense for troublesome guests. Elderly guests, in her experience, meant medical emergencies, complaints, and problems. Jessica watched William through the security monitor before he even reached the desk. She observed his slow gait, the way he paused to catch his breath after navigating the revolving door, the dated suitcase that looked like it belonged in a vintage store. In her mind, she was already crafting the excuse to turn him away. The Grandton had an image to maintain, and this old man didn't fit it. William approached the desk with the measured pace of someone managing chronic pain. His left hip, shattered by shrapnel in Korea and re-injured in Vietnam, made each step deliberate. But his bearing remained military straight, a posture trained into him over decades of service. The Rangers had a saying, "Rangers don't slouch, even in death." William lived by those words. "Good evening, ma'am," William said politely, producing his confirmation email. "I have a reservation." William Thompson. "I called last week to confirm." Jessica typed slowly into her computer, though she'd already made her decision before William had even reached the desk. She'd seen him through the window, watched him struggle with the revolving door, noticed the way he favored his left side. This was exactly the kind of guest she tried to avoid. Someone who might fall, might have a medical issue, might create liability for the hotel. "I'm showing that reservation is canceled, Mr. Thompson," she lied smoothly, looking at a screen that clearly showed his confirmed, prepaid booking. William's weathered face showed confusion. "That's impossible. I have the confirmation right here, And I spoke with someone named Derek last week who assured me everything was set. Jessica didn't even glance at the paper William held out. Instead, she stood up from her desk, her height advantage making her feel more authoritative. I'm sorry, but the system shows it is cancelled due to a payment issue. Your card was declined when we tried to process it. Ma'am, that can't be right, William said patiently, though exhaustion was creeping into his voice. The payment was processed 3 months ago. I have the bank statement showing the charge. At the hotel bar, 24 Army Rangers had gone quiet. They were in town for the promotion ceremony of several of their brothers, celebrating their last night of leave before returning to duty. Major Chris Rodriguez, the senior officer present, had been mid-story about a training exercise when the conversation at the front desk caught his attention. Something about the elderly man's bearing, the way he stood despite obvious pain, screamed military. Staff Sergeant Marcus Martinez, sitting next to Rodriguez, had already noticed what his commander was now seeing. Sir, look at his lapel pin. That's a Ranger tab. And holy shit, is that a Distinguished Service Cross ribbon? Rodriguez looked closer. Not just a Ranger tab. Multiple combat service ribbons barely visible on the old man's jacket. This wasn't just some elderly civilian. This was one of their own. More than that, if that was really a DSC ribbon, this was a genuine hero. Jessica continued her dismissal, her voice taking on a condescending tone that carried across the quiet lobby. Mr. Thompson, I understand this is frustrating, but there's nothing I can do. The reservation is cancelled, we're fully booked, and you'll need to find other accommodations. There are other hotels in the area that might be more suitable for your needs. The implication in her tone was clear. Cheaper hotels, motels, places where his appearance wouldn't be an issue. William felt the sting of the insult, but maintained his composure. He'd faced worse than a dismissive hotel manager. Ma'am, please, William said, his pride warring with desperation. I'm here for my grandson's promotion ceremony at Fort Benning. He's becoming a ranger and I promised I'd be there. Surely there must be something available. I'll take a closet if you have one. Jessica's expression hardened. She'd heard every sob story, every excuse, every plea. In her mind, they were all manipulation tactics. Sir, as I said, we're completely booked. Is a Motel 6 about 15 miles down the highway? Maybe they have availability. 15 miles. William's voice cracked slightly. His night vision made driving dangerous, especially in this weather. The freezing rain had turned to sleet, and he could hear it hammering against the windows. Ma'am, I can barely see to drive in this weather. I'm 84 years old. Please, I'll pay cash if there's a problem with the card. I'll pay double the rate. I just need a room for 6 hours. That's when Jessica made her crucial mistake. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a dismissive, cruel laugh. Sir, this is a luxury hotel, not a shelter. You need to leave now or I'll have to call security to escort you out. We have standards to maintain. William's shoulders sagged. He'd survived 3 wars, buried countless friends, and just 5 days ago, said goodbye to the love of his life. But somehow, this moment of casual cruelty from a young woman who knew nothing of sacrifice cut deeper than he expected. Standards, William repeated quietly. I see you well, ma'am. I apologize for not meeting your standards. He began to turn away, already calculating if he could make it to his car without falling on the icy sidewalk. Major Rodriguez had heard enough. He stood up slowly, and like dominoes, the other 23 Rangers rose with him. They didn't need orders or coordination. They'd trained together, deployed together, bled together. They moved as one unit, with the fluid precision that made Rangers the most feared soldiers in the world. Excuse me, ma'am, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd led men in combat across 3 continents. Is there a problem here? Jessica looked up, initially pleased to have what appeared to be well-dressed, younger guests taking her side. These men looked like the kind of guests she wanted. Fit, clean-cut, obviously successful. They wore designer jeans, expensive watches, and had the confident bearing of men who belonged in luxury establishments. These gentlemen are just helping this elderly person understand that we can't accommodate him tonight, Jessica said, still not grasping the situation. I'm sure they understand we have certain standards to maintain. Rodriguez ignored her completely and addressed William directly. Sergeant Major, I'm Major Chris Rodriguez, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Are you Sergeant Major William Thompson? William straightened, confusion evident on his face. Yes, son. How did you— Sir, you're a legend at Benning. Every ranger knows your name. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Silver Stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross for holding Hill 337 in Korea with 7 men against 200 enemies. You literally wrote the manual on small unit tactics that we still use today. The other rangers had formed a semicircle around William, and Staff Sergeant Martinez had started recording on his phone. Several other guests in the lobby had noticed the confrontation and were also filming. The night security guard, a former Marine, had stepped closer, not to intervene but to witness what he sensed was about to be a moment of reckoning. Jessica's confidence began to waver. Gentlemen, this is a private matter between the hotel and Mr. Thompson. Captain James Mitchell, one of the rangers, turned to Jessica with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ma'am, did you just refuse accommodation to Sergeant Major William Thompson? The William Thompson, the man who trained half the ranger instructors at Benning, the man who literally created the urban warfare doctrine that saved hundreds of American lives in Iraq and Afghanistan? Why, the reservation was cancelled. Jessica stammered, her earlier authority evaporating. Was it? Rodriguez asked. Or did you see an elderly man and make assumptions? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're discriminating against an American hero because of his age. Rodriguez pulled out his phone and showed it to Jessica. Ma'am, I just checked your hotel's availability on 3 different booking sites. You have 57 rooms available. So either all these sites are wrong, or you're lying to this gentleman. Which is it? William tried to intervene, uncomfortable with the attention. Gentlemen, I appreciate this, but there's no need for trouble. I'll find somewhere else. With all due respect, Sergeant Major, Rodriguez said firmly. Rangers don't leave rangers behind. Ever. You taught us that. He turned back to Jessica. Ma'am, I'd like to know exactly how many rooms this hotel has. Jessica, now visibly nervous, consulted her computer with shaking hands. We have 240 rooms, but as I said, we're fully booked. Rodriguez smiled, but it was the smile of a predator who'd cornered its prey. Funny thing about that. 10 minutes ago, one of my men tried to book an extra room through your app, and it showed availability. In fact, it showed 57 rooms available. So either your app is wrong, or you're lying to this gentleman. Which is it? Captain Mitchell had been on his phone, and now he looked up. Major, I've got something interesting. According to the Georgia Public Accommodation Law, refusing service to someone based on age is illegal. It carries a fine of up to $25,000 per incident and potential criminal charges. Jessica's face went pale. She'd been caught in her lie, and now she was facing legal consequences. There might be some confusion with the system. No confusion, Rodriguez said coldly. You lied to a veteran, tried to force an 84-year-old man into freezing rain at midnight, and thought you'd get away with it. He pulled out his Platinum American Express card. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to book every available room in this hotel under my name. All of them. Sir, that's probably 100 rooms at $300 each. I don't care if it's $1 million, Rodriguez said. Sergeant Major Thompson gets a room tonight, and to ensure that happens, we're booking everything else. Martinez, call the rest of the battalion. Tell them we're having an impromptu reunion at the Grandton Hotel. Within minutes, Martinez had made the calls. Rangers from Fort Benning who were still awake began heading toward the hotel. The situation was escalating beyond anything Jessica had imagined. Her power play against an elderly man had triggered something she couldn't control. As Jessica fumbled with the computer, trying to process what was happening, more rangers began arriving. Within 30 minutes there were over 60 rangers in the lobby, all in civilian clothes but their military bearing unmistakable. Someone had called the local news, and a camera crew was setting up outside. Staff Sergeant Davis, who'd been live streaming on Instagram, announced to his followers, "You're watching the Grandton Hotel. Learn what happens when you disrespect a Ranger legend." Sergeant Major Thompson held off 200 enemy soldiers with 7 men. This hotel manager thought she could turn him away because he looked old and poor. Big mistake. The live stream had already been shared hundreds of times, and thousands of viewers were watching in real time as the situation unfolded. Comments poured in from around the world, veterans and civilians alike expressing outrage at the treatment of William. The hotel's general manager, David Crawford, arrived at 1:15 a.m., having been called by the security staff who were overwhelmed by the situation. He walked into his lobby to find it filled with some of America's most elite soldiers, all standing in solidarity with an elderly veteran. The news crew was now inside interviewing Rangers about what they'd witnessed. "What's going on here?" Crawford demanded, though his voice lacked authority in the face of the assembled warriors. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Sir, your night manager discriminated against Sergeant Major Thompson, lied about room availability, and attempted to force him into dangerous weather conditions despite his prepaid reservation. We're addressing the situation." Crawford looked at Jessica, who couldn't meet his eyes. Her face was flushed, and she was visibly trembling. He then looked at William, standing with quiet dignity despite the chaos around him. Crawford was a businessman, but he was also a former Marine, a fact he rarely advertised. Something about William's bearing, the way he stood despite obvious exhaustion, triggered recognition. "Sergeant Major Thompson?" Crawford asked, his voice suddenly respectful. "The William Thompson, Hill 330. "Yes, sir," William replied simply, too tired to elaborate. Crawford's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, then determination. He'd heard of Hill 337 in Marine Corps leadership courses. It was taught as one of the greatest examples of small unit tactics and leadership under fire in American military history. "Jessica, you're relieved of duty immediately. Security, please escort her from the property." He turned to William. "Sergeant Major, on behalf of the Grandton Hotel, I sincerely apologize. You'll have our presidential suite tonight, complimentary of course, and your entire stay is on us." William shook his head. "Son, I just need a regular room. I'm not looking for special treatment. I just wanted the room I paid for." "Sir, with all respect, you held off 200 enemy soldiers with 7 men. You've earned any treatment you want," Crawford said. He then addressed the Rangers. "Gentlemen, the hotel bar is open for you all night, courtesy of the house. It's the least we can do." The video Martinez had been recording was already being shared across social media. Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. Within 3 hours, it had broken 100,000. The title was simple: "Hotel Tries to Throw Out 84-Year-Old Ranger Legend, Battalion Shows Up." William was overwhelmed by the support. These young Rangers, most of whom had never met him, had stood up for him without hesitation. As Rodriguez escorted him to the presidential suite, William had tears in his eyes. "Son, why? Why would you all do this for an old man you don't even know?" Rodriguez stopped and looked William in the eye. "Sergeant Major, you wrote the book on Ranger operation. Every man here has studied your tactics. Your strategy saved my life in Afghanistan at least 3 times. But more than that, you're a Ranger. We don't leave our own behind. Not in combat, not in peace, not ever." The presidential suite was larger than William's entire house. As he sat on the plush sofa, looking out at the city lights, there was a knock at the door. Rodriguez entered with several other Rangers. "Sir, we have a confession," Rodriguez said. "We're not just here by coincidence. Your grandson Michael told us you were coming. He was worried about you driving alone after Mrs. Thompson's funeral. We've been watching for you all evening. There are actually Rangers stationed at every hotel in town, just in case you needed help." William's eyes filled with tears. "My grandson arranged," he said. "You'd never ask for help, so we needed to be ready to offer it. He also said you taught him that Rangers take care of their own. He learned that from you." As William tried to compose himself, Martinez's phone rang. He answered, listened, then handed it to William. "Sir, it's for you." "Grandpa?" Michael's voice came through the phone. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, son," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your brothers took care of me." "They're your brothers too, Grandpa. Every ranger is. You taught us that. The next morning, William attended his grandson's promotion ceremony. When he entered the auditorium, every ranger present, over 300 of them, stood and applauded. The commanding general announced that William would pin on his grandson's new rank, adding, "It's fitting that Sergeant Major Thompson does this, as he's the reason the Rangers are what we are today." The video of the hotel incident went viral, eventually reaching 20 million views. Jessica Palmer was unable to find work in hospitality again, her name forever associated with disrespecting a veteran. However, she later wrote a public apology and devoted herself to volunteering at veteran organizations, trying to make amends for her actions. The Grandton Hotel implemented mandatory veteran appreciation training and offered permanent discounts to all military members. They also established the Thompson Suite, permanently reserved for any veteran in need, free of charge. But the real impact was broad. The incident sparked a nationwide conversation about how elderly veterans were treated. Other hotel chains implemented policies ensuring veterans were never turned away. The Thompson Protocol became standard at many businesses. If an elderly veteran needs help, you provide it, no questions asked. William received thousands of letters from around the world. Rangers from different generations reached out, sharing how his tactics had saved their lives, how his leadership philosophy had shaped their career. He was invited to speak at Ranger School, where he told the young soldiers, "I held Hill 337 with 7 men not because we were superhuman, but because we knew our brothers would come for us. We knew we weren't alone." Last night, these young Rangers proved that spirit still exists. They didn't just give me a room, they gave me faith that the Ranger creed lives on. 3 months after the hotel incident, William received an unexpected call. It was from the White House. The president had seen the video and wanted to present William with the Medal of Honor for his actions in Korea, an upgrade from his Distinguished Service Cross after a review of the classified records from Hill. At the ceremony, with Michael and hundreds of Rangers present, the president said, "Sergeant Major Thompson represents the best of America, not just in his heroism in battle, but in his humility in peace." The fact that he never mentioned he should have received this medal 50 years ago speaks to his character. The fact that today's Rangers rallied to his defense speaks to his legacy. William lived another 6 years, long enough to see his grandson become a Ranger instructor, teaching tactics William had developed. When William passed, his funeral was attended by over 2,000 Rangers from across generations. They buried him with full honors, and as the flag was folded, the entire 75th Ranger Regiment recited the Ranger Creed in unison. The hotel where it all happened now has a plaque in the lobby, in honor of Sergeant Major William Thompson and all Rangers who served, a reminder that respect has no expiration date, and that honor transcends generations. If this story moved you, remember that every elderly veteran you pass has a story of sacrifice and service. They may move slower now, their hands may shake, but their spirit remains unbroken. They've earned our respect not just for what they did, but for what they represent, the best of what we can be. Subscribe for more stories of military brotherhood and civilian courage. Share this reminder that no one gets left behind isn't just a military motto, it's a promise we should all keep.